How's it going, everyone? In today's video we're going to be returning to our popular 90s house series. I often get questions asking me what the best plugins are for certain sounds and certain styles. So for this tutorial I essentially figured I would break down my top 6 favourite synth plugins for creating music in the kind of 90s house style. Without further ado, let's get into it. So plugin number 1 is a plugin by a company you might not be familiar with called Meatbeats. They have loads of cool underground production tools on their website, including sample packs and different plugins. The one I want to focus on is this one called Orbhits, which is free. We've got this kind of very simple interface, and I believe there is actually a paid version which gives you a bit more in terms of customization. It basically features loads of 90s inspired sounds, different one-shots including like bass, chords, hits, pads, SFX and vocals. Pretty much all the sounds that you would think of when it comes to 90s house. We'll just show a few examples of the different categories. Bass, got chords, some pretty nice kind of rave stabby ones with some pads. There's loads of really cool sounds in here, and SFX, vocals as well. So loads of pretty cool sounds, and like I said, it's free, so definitely be sure to go check that out. The way I've kind of used it here is just for those kind of iconic stabs, which we're using as kind of SFX in this section. Just these kind of transition kind of SFX every 4 bars or so. There's loads of different uses, but that's kind of how I use the Orbhits. The next plugin we have is also by Meatbeats. This plugin is called FEM-BASO. I believe it's a paid one that you can get for like £15. It works in a similar way as a kind of sampler. What you've essentially got is 100 different presets covering loads of different bass types. You've got donk. Put a donk on it. Put a donk on it. Put a donk on it. You've got Reese. You've got subs. You've got synth basses. My personal favorite is the classic bass sound that you hear in a lot of these tracks, which is called the lately bass. So this track actually utilized a different bass, but I kept this example in just to show. So it's a very nice kind of fat analog plucky bass, and you've got loads of different ones. You'll see they all sound very similar, but just different samples. So the lately bass is very much my kind of go-to. It's quite a good foundation to work off, but sometimes the sound can sound quite weak in different contexts. So what I might do is I might layer it with one of the other types of bass. Maybe go for these warm ones. And it just kind of helps to give it a fuller sound. So that is essentially the FEM-BASO, which I think is a really underrated plugin for bass. Hi everyone, sorry to interrupt the video. I just wanted to take a few seconds to reveal a few quick projects I've been working on. Firstly, I've been working on a 90s house course, which goes very in depth on this style. This course will essentially cover everything you need to know to create music in this style. Basically think the tutorials we've covered so far, but 10 times better. My next announcement is that I've been working on a new 90s house sample pack, essentially giving you all the sounds you might need to start making music in this genre. If either of these sound of interest to you, then what I'll do is I'll leave a few links down below for you to join the waiting list, where you not only get first access to these resources when they go live, but I'll also throw in a cheeky discount for you just as a thanks for your support. With all that covered, let's get back to the video. The next plugin I'll recommend is actually a company, so multiple plugins. The company is essentially Roland Cloud. I've talked about a few of these plugins in previous tutorials, namely the SRX Dance Trax and the JV180. I just find these kind of plugins have loads of really nice kind of 90s inspired synth sounds. This can stretch to pads and chords and arps and that kind of thing, but it does tend to be those kind of synth leads that I gravitate towards. So I've used the JV180 here. The other one that has become one of my go-tos is the SRX Dance Trax, which is very similar, just with different sounds essentially. So these are the kind of common ones I'm using at the moment, but I'm sure you'd possibly find other stuff, including this one that we'll move on to called Zenology, which I just think's insane. So I've used it here for a lead, but I've also used it for the pad and the strings as well. So we'll start with the lead. In this example, I've actually just used this kind of cowbell kind of lead as a fill. If I go to the plugin, you've got all these different categories, loads of really nice instruments like your brasses, your pads, your synths, everything you really need. So I've kind of used it as that synth lead there. If we just move down, I've used one for this chord. So we've got this organ chord. I've literally taken two different layers, taken this kind of like 60s organ there and layered it with what I think is like the CZ. You've got a lot of those classic synth leads and a lot of those more natural instruments like your organs, your strings. So if you're looking for those kind of instruments, then the Zenology provides a solid option. Alternatively, if you are just looking for organs, then you could also check out our House and Garage organ pack, which is just as good. So used it for that kind of organ. The final place I used it was just these kind of pads. And then this kind of string sound for strings, the Zenology's kind of become one of my go-tos, just because it's got such a large library of different strings and it saves me constantly reusing the same one. So that is essentially my three go-tos from Roland Cloud. The fourth plugin we have is one that I've shown quite a few times, and it's normally for a specific purpose. So the plugin I'm referring to is one called Bluetooth by Papen. If I just go to the banks, you'll see there's loads of ones that would have potential in this style, but the ones I quite like are these kind of art banks and sequenced banks, where you can essentially be lazy and get instant inspiration. I'll just show a few examples. So my kind of go-tos are normally those kind of sequency ARPs. There's of course loads of different plugins that have these options, but I personally think Bluetooth is one of the best for these. The next plugin that I would recommend is the KORG M1. As I'm sure many of you will know, it's an absolute staple in electronic music. So if you crave those 90s sounds, it doesn't come much better than this plugin. If I quickly open it up, you'll see all these kind of different categories, and then inside the browser you kind of have the option between combined, which is basically just layers that have loads of different instruments, or you can go for like the individual ones, which is kind of what I do. So my kind of go-to for this sound is those kind of classic keyboard piano sounds, just the kind of iconic 90s rave pianos that just remind me of that era so much. So the example I've got here is just these kind of like ravey chords. Just like really nice sounds. So if you want a plugin which kind of defines that era in a nutshell, then I would look no further than the kind of KORG M1. The final plugin is also a free one called Rave Generator with loads of different kind of rave stabs. It's a very cool plugin, but there's an issue that a lot of people have in that the plugin hasn't been updated for a while, so it doesn't work for everyone. But fear not, as I essentially created a sample pack which samples every single sample from that plugin, and it's completely free. So what I'll be doing is I'll be leaving it down below if you want to grab that, and I'll just play a few examples of these sounds. So it's mostly like synth sounds. There's a few kind of vocals in there. A few kind of classic sounds as well. You got these M1, the CZ, lately. So those are kind of classic stabs. I think for the example I used here, I just used a sample, but it's very similar to the ones you'd kind of get from that plugin. So that is essentially the Rave Generator, and that essentially concludes my favourite synths for 90s house. So that's could be it for this one. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to find the best plugins to do certain things, so the kind of aim of this video was to essentially compile a selection of my favourite synth plugins for creating that 90s house style and those classic 90s inspired sounds that we all love. If you enjoyed the video, then do be sure to give it a like, subscribe for more videos on this style, and be sure to check the description for various resources like the project file and the free Rave Generator sample pack I mentioned during the video. See you in the next one.